Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Common Cause 2021 Stop Disinfo training. We're going to give folks a few minutes to join us. So while you're waiting, if you want to put your name and pronouns and where you're watching from in the chat, we'll get started soon. I see a lot of familiar names in the chat. Two Steves in a row. Steve Hancock, I owe you an email. I know that. Owen, welcome. Angela, hello. Brian, I'm also here in New York. Welcome, welcome. Hopefully this will be just an hour. Karen, nice to see you too. We're watching our attendee number creep up, but we'll get started in about 1 to 2 minutes. So thanks so much. Also, for folks who are new to the webinar format, unfortunately, we can't all see each other, so you're just here seeing our panelists today. It helps us keep organized, but also I'm sad that I don't get to see your smiling faces. That being said, at the end, you can go ahead and unmute yourselves. I will let you do that, and we can have a little chat toward the end. Love that you're here with your husband, Robin. That is great. I guess couples that get trained together about disinformation stay together. Yeah, that one wasn't as natural as I wanted it to be. Okay, well, I think we have a critical mass. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. That being said, we are recording today. So if there are stragglers, fear not, you won't miss anything and can always watch it again later. All right. Welcome to our 2021 Stop Disinformation Social Media Monitoring Training. I'm so happy that you're all here with us today. So a few brief introductions on who's in front of you. My name is Rose Lang Meso. If we haven't had a chance to meet yet, I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Stop Disinformation Field Manager here at Common Cause.
Hi, I'm John Schmidt. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm a Stop Disinformation Fellow of Common Cause, and I will be helping answer your questions in the chat through this presentation.
Awesome, John. Thank you so much. And as you all know, we have marketed this today as a leadership training because it is, and it's for all of our community leaders who are here. And so, of course, we had to feature them in the training. So Ron, I'll let you go ahead first, and then we'll go right down the line.
Sure. Hi, my name is Ron Bloom. I go by he, him, his. I'm a volunteer captain. I focus primarily on Twitter, and that's about it.
Hey, I'm Kristen Cheney. I go by she, her, hers. I'm a volunteer captain again, and I dabble in Twitter and Facebook and Instagram.
Hi, I'm Abby Raymond, and I she, her, hers, and a volunteer captain, and focus mainly pretty much all on Twitter.
I'm muted. Can you believe that? I'm still doing that month 9 into working remotely. So if you were ever worried that you did not have the tech skills to do this job, never fear, I just did that. So welcome again to all of our captains. We're so excited that you're here with us today. Okay, so just a few Zoom guidelines. This training will be recorded, but it will only be sent to folks who registered. You can go ahead to send questions or messages to the panelists, so the 5 of us, by using the chat icon, and our friend John will be the one who is monitoring that. You can also use the raise hand option, but I likely won't see it until the question and answer period, which will be at the end of the webinar. Okay, so what's our agenda here today? First of all, we're going to talk about our program's impact so far. So we've had a full-fledged community-based social media monitoring and Stop Disinfo program since July. So we're going to talk a little bit more about what our impact has looked like. We're also going to review a couple basics. I mean, some of you are in Slack every day, but some folks might not have been here since election day. So we want to be sure that we're all starting on the same page. Then we're going to do a disinfo debrief about what we're expecting in 2021 for the first half of the year. And then we're going to talk about taking on leadership. So as some of you may have noticed, our staff has recently shrunk. And so because we have less capacity, we really need a lot from you. And there are 4 main things that we're going to talk about today. The first is how to have meaningful conversations around misinformation. So when somebody posts something that's not right, but it's clearly not malicious disinfo, what do you do with that? We're going to help answer that question. We also need folks to post proactively. And so Kristen's going to walk us through that process. We also need people to post inoculation content through our social media squad. So if that's something you've seen in my emails or Danielle's and you don't know what it is, we're going to iron that all out today. And then as always, monitoring remains central to our mission. And so Abby's going to talk about exactly what our shift captains and social media monitoring captains do on a daily basis. So now I'm going to turn it over to Ron.
Hi. Do I have control over the slides? Or I don't think I
Nope,
do.
but I will guide you right through.
Okay, thank you.
You just
Okay.
nod at me and I'm ready to go.
All right, I'm ready to go. So yeah, what has been our impact? So in the few months that social media monitoring by Common Cause has been going on, we've got over 51,000 incident reports. We've got over 4,200 monitors that have been trained for this, and over 3 million hours monitored. And we've successfully removed and flagged problematic content. If you've gone to Twitter and ever noticed a message there that said, this content has been disputed and stuff like that, that may very well be in response to something that somebody raised as part of this program. And finally, we've tracked key disinformation narratives and sent up proactive pro-democracy inoculation content. Okay, next. So what are we going to do going forward? So the Common Cause Stop Disinformation project has 2 main components. There's proactive posting and there's social media monitoring. So proactive posting allows us to inoculate people against disinformation. If people have correct information, they're less likely to be tricked. And I can tell you personally that despite doing this for all this time, and I like to think I have a critical mind that I've always had one, I get tripped up and I'm still getting tripped up. There's so much out there. And there's also social media monitoring. That's the other part. And that remains central to stopping disinformation. That effort continues. And this program is shared among all of us in our grassroots community. And Common Cause is very much a grassroots organization.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ron. Okay, now we're just going to review a few basics in case folks are a little rusty. So, vocab lesson, the most fun part of the training. So first and foremost, Common Cause is a nonpartisan organization. So what does this actually mean? It means that we're not biased in favor or against a particular political group or a party, right? So regardless of where misinformation or disinformation or voter suppression come from, whether that's from a Democrat, a Republican, an independent, or some other party that we don't know yet, we're going to go ahead and disrupt that. We can't help if one party perhaps pushes more than another, but that is another topic. Inoculation content is something that we're going to talk about today, and so I want to be sure to frame that for all of you. So like Ron was saying, inoculation content defends voters against disinformation before it's been seen. So in this way, we can flood the market with good content that helps people be empowered with the right information before all of the nonsense comes down the pike from disinfo suppliers. And then, of course, we have our big distinction between misinformation and disinformation, which is what we monitor for in the social media monitoring part of our work. So misinformation is unintentionally misleading content, right? That nature of intent is really crucial here. So if somebody posts something by mistake that's not right, say about the census, they probably aren't trying to say that the census is completely bad. And we're actually going to talk a little bit about census messaging later, look under the hood at that a little, because that one can be tricky. Disinformation, on the other hand, is a little more sinister. So this is intentionally misleading content. And this content is made with the intent to fool people or disenfranchise them. And this is something that we're continuing to see even after the 2020 election. So our program's goals, they're twofold. The first is posting our inoculation content, and that involves proactive education. So we're going to be telling voters what to expect when the census results are come out, right? And saturating the market with factual information. And then, of course, we're fighting mis and disinfo. We're flagging it, and then we're empowering Americans by stopping deceptive practices. So all in all, even though sometimes we get really in the weeds of nasty posts on Facebook, we really do have a positive impact here. And our goals, we've clearly met, right? Because everything that Ron said we're doing is in line with what we hope to do in these goals, which we set like almost a year ago now. And as a review, this is how the program works. So starting at the upper right-hand side here, we have grassroots monitors. So that's all of you sharing pro-voter and pro-democracy content more broadly. You can share that from us or from other trustworthy sources. And when we get to the proactive posting piece, we'll dive into this a little deeper. Then through our monitoring work, we ask you to find that concerning content, right? So during an election cycle, we look for voters who need our assistance. We also look for misinformation and disinformation that may be bubbling up at first in really small ways, right? Like your local moms group, but then could go viral on Twitter, if it's not reined in. Then when you send us that content, we can do one of two things. The first is rapid response. So we have a disinformation analyst team that I work really closely with, and we'll work with them to confirm the situation and then respond if it's appropriate. So say, for example, there's a situation where a bunch of people were misinformed about a polling location. We could go ahead and text everybody who votes at that location to let them know of the correct info. More relevant now, because we're not in an election season, is requesting a takedown. So disinformation analysts and our team, including myself, contact social media platforms, civic integrity offices, take that office name as you will, and we work with them to remove problematic content that violates terms of service, or at the very least, we'll get things flagged, right? Saying something to the effect of, this is election information that is disputed, or that this fact could not be confirmed. Then our whole team, so the comms team, the digital folks, the grassroots folks, the disinformation folks, all come together to create counter messaging. So sometimes that's inoculation, but sometimes it's direct counter speech to the disinfo or to the problem. And then that's what we give to you, right? So it's a full cycle that's totally interrupted without you guys. And so that's why we're so grateful that you're here to monitor with us. And then the number one question that I see in my inbox every day is, hey, Rose, I found X thing. Can you do anything about it? And so we like to give, to the best of our ability, a guide of what is actionable, and then in a moment, what's not. So there's different types of action, right? So there's platform action, and that's great. That's external. It can set policy expectations, but that's not really necessarily always in our control. And that's why I'm so grateful that Common Cause has our own set of actions that we can also take. So on the platform side, we have removal and flags. Things that might warrant removal include direct threats. So for example, somebody doxing someone saying that they were responsible for stealing the election for Joe Biden and giving their information about where they live. Incorrect information that is not at all framed as an opinion. So for example, I think the election was stolen and the election was stolen are two different things. If somebody puts I think in front of it, automatically that won't be removed because it's an opinion. So it's annoying, but that's how it works. Mass threats of violence also are removable. And I think since the events of January 6th, this is even more true. And then anything that explicitly violates the platform's civic integrity policies. So that's something where usually our staff uses a judgment call. Things that might just be misleading, or things that are speculative, right? So information about elections that haven't been called, those will often get flags. So that often won't warrant a removal in the platform's eye, but we can take action. And then if we don't think a platform is going to do something, Common Cause can take two types of action as well. So we can always build out content. So I'm really lucky that I work closely with a communications team, and we have a bank of content that we can use and send out to you depending on what issues we're seeing out there. And unfortunately, we often have to do this in cases of voter depression or suppression, i.e. Something saying that your vote doesn't matter, don't bother, or mis or disinfo that sort of gets through the loopholes of platforms' policies. And then also during election seasons only, we can assist voters. So if voters need help or don't know where to go, we can help them by either answering their questions directly or directing them to our 866 Our Vote hotline. And then here's what's not. So opinions, again, it's a tricky one. I think Democrats rigged the election and Democrats rigged the election to these platforms are distinct, right? They're not going to regulate opinions under an argument of a free speech issue. So that is not actionable. Anything about a particular candidate or an elected official is also not in our lane. I promise that President Biden has a whole team doing this. And so us doing this in addition isn't really a value add, right? We want to be adding value where we can, and we're really unique in doing this disinfo work about democracy issues and voting in elections, right? So I'm going to let Biden's staff deal with that. I totally have faith. And unfortunately, voter depression is something that we can't do anything about, but we can probably make content to combat, right? So saying voting doesn't matter, we can't really do anything about that. But saying, say, that people of color shouldn't vote because the US is a white supremacist state, while we can't report that, we can hear that, right? And try to make messaging to remember that in a democracy, all of our voices should be heard. And then non-democracy related disinformation is also not in our lane. So an example of this here is on the right-hand side, where this person says, walking around in public with no mask takes great courage. And then there's a lot of other nonsense. First of all, this is obviously disinformation. My personal view is everyone should wear a mask. That doesn't seem like it's controversial. But that being said, this type of disinformation isn't within our jurisdiction, right? So there are folks who are doing COVID disinfo and work with that office at each platform, but we work with the civic integrity folks. So if we were to bring them this, they would just be like, what, Rose, what are you doing? And it also isn't the best way for us to spend our resources. All right, so now we're going to go into looking under the hood at our disinfo debrief. So what we're expecting to see. Voter fraud. So the voter fraud narratives continue, and there are continuing claims that the election, specifically the 2020 presidential election, was stolen, or that vote by mail is fraudulent. And these claims, unfortunately, have moved from more fringe platforms like Gab and WeMe to the mainstream. And these narratives are prevalent even now. So at this point, the inauguration is over. So we sort of thought the voter fraud narratives might die down, but no, we were wrong. The impact of this. So this narrative, we know, is going to be used by elected officials, as well as people who actually run elections to justify bad voting bills in state houses. So everybody's legislative sessions are starting up, and there have already been bills to limit voting rights and voting access under the false claim that there was mass voter fraud in states, in over 3 states, and we expect them in about a half a dozen more. So this is something that's going to have a real policy impact. And we can address this, right? So the C4 side of Common Cause, which is a different spot than our C3 education arm, which is what I mostly work in, but our C4 side can do platform advocacy work. We can work alongside state level decision makers like representatives and people who work in election security, as well as voting rights and elections access, and then collaborate with our disinformation analyst team. So these are some things that we can do to combat this. And the way that our content and monitoring fits in is that when we monitor and say, look at all of this stuff about voter fraud that's on Instagram, we can then bring this to people and say, hey, Instagram, you're responsible and complicit in putting out this information that's incorrect, right? We're saying, hey, your constituents are really concerned about what you're saying about voter fraud, right? So we can really make a difference here. And that's one disinfo narrative that we're going to follow a lot. Here we have an example, and you'll notice it is from January 20th, 2021. So this was not something that was posted hypothetically. It was something that was posted directly at the time of the inauguration. So here this tweet reads, until the people of the United States get a proper investigation into voter fraud, 400,000 votes at 4 a.m. overturning the election, Joe Biden will remain an illegitimate president. So this is a good example for a bunch of reasons, and we're going to break it down right now. The first thing is that you may at first think that this is about Joe Biden, so you shouldn't report it. But that's not true, because they're not actually talking about Joe Biden just as himself. They're talking about our government process and about our democracy by making a false assertion about voter fraud. Secondly, this is actually something that we could try to make more narratives to correct, right? So we know that some ballots came in later because they were vote by mail, right? And so some people were really confused on election night when ballots were being counted after polls had closed. So that's another way that we could engage with this type of content. What we don't want to do with disinformation is amplify it, right? So we're not going to like this, we're not going to reply, we're not going to retweet angrily, but this would be a good thing to report and a type of disinfo that we expect to see a lot more of, unfortunately. And here it goes right into this more specifically than just voter fraud in general. Specifically, the outcome of the 2020 presidential election has been a source of a lot of disinfo. So disinformation suppliers have put out a lot of wild conspiracy theories out there about this. You can feel free to pop your favorite in the chat, keep John on his toes. And this has been a conscious attempt to thwart public trust in the electoral process, right? Both in the 2020 election and beyond. One of the most recent theories that we're monitoring is that there's going to be another inauguration where Trump will be named the president on March 4th. So if you've been on a shift recently, you'll see that March 4th is one of our target search terms. So the impact of this is clear. This undermines the vote and the will of the people, right? Which is antithetical to everything that Common Cause stands for. So what can we do about this? This is one area where our proactive, positive counter speech is really important. We need to reaffirm the results of the election and reinforce public confidence in our process, right? And while doing this, we need to be really careful not to oversimplify this. So what does that mean? If we were to say that everything in the election worked perfectly, that would be disingenuous, right? Because a lot of young people and people of color disproportionately had a difficult time getting access to a mail-in ballot, right? And so we don't want to just say that everything was perfect and there's no room for improvement, but we also don't want to fall into a narrative where we're at all questioning the results of the election because we know that this election was fair and free. And then we also are going to continue to work with partner organizations in representing groups that are most impacted by this disinfo. So we have a great community here, but we also work with some communities where English is not a first language, right? That way we can see disinformation happening, say, in Vietnamese or Spanish. So that's how we're attacking this form of disinformation. And here it is again. We have another example where it's a quote unquote friendly reminder that President Donald J. Trump actually won 410 electoral votes to Biden's measly 128. The best is yet to come with a map that has been doctored. So here, this would be something to report. I do think it's funny that this person thinks that capitalizing president will change anything, but hey, you got to keep it a little bit lighthearted when you do this work all day, every day. And then the census. So the census is a tricky topic because we're caught between two extremes of disinformation, right? And so we're given two options and they're a false choice. So the first disinformation narrative that we see about the census is that the census was broken beyond repair and we need to throw it out, right? Just like throw it out entirely. And who's going to push this? People who are losing their seat. And then the other side of it is B, which is that the census was run perfectly. So we don't need to worry about making it more inclusive or representative in the future. It was good enough. It was a pandemic, people get with the program. And that's not right either, because just like in the last example, this doesn't leave us room to improve. And we know and acknowledge that there were problems with the census, but that does not mean that it is unusable. That was a lot of negatives, so I'll say that again. We know that the census was imperfect, but this doesn't mean we can't use it. That's better. So the impact of this, we have these extreme and inaccurate views, quite frankly, that interrupt process and progress on each extended extreme. And so how are we going to address this? We're going to work with national and state-based census experts. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert about the census and how it was conducted in every state. So I'm going to actually go and turn to the actual experts. Just like I attempted to do now, we're going to thread the needle between legitimizing the 2020 census without ignoring its historical and enduring flaws. And we're going to keep following this through redistricting. So we're going to be really looking at this, and this is going to be one of our primary focuses between March and August. And honestly, I'm oddly excited about it because we actually get to have a positive impact here. And then here's some other things that are on our minds. So on the disinformation side, we're seeing a lot about local media, election security, extremist conspiracies, and government process, specifically conviction of the president, as well as appointments in Biden's cabinet. So these are other narratives, while not in our formal, hey, these are the priorities, these are other things that we're looking for and will be following continuously. I think the big one to consider here that I want to flag for everyone is election security. Again, there's going to be a set of false choices presented to us that we can either be secure or accessible, and we know that's not true. And again, remember, we're not going to be advocating for anything in particular. Instead, we're going to be sure to keep putting out correct information to people through our proactive posting arm, and then monitoring for disinformation when we see it. And then overall, the Stop Disinformation program as a whole is thinking about media and democracy work. So that's another team at Common Cause who we work with. We're going to be thinking about platform accountability and how our monitoring work can help other parts of the organization on the C4 side try to hold platforms accountable and advocate with them. We're going to be working on civic education, especially pertaining to the census. And then again, having the census and redistricting as our main focus starting in March. Although unfortunately, I think voter fraud will still kind of be hanging around too. And here we just have some examples. So here we have this idea about the election being stolen and that the fight is not over. And that liberals posed as Trump supporters to storm the Capitol. So that again is like the Antifa actually did it narrative. And then we have big tech censorship is out of control. And I think it's funny that somebody posted this from Judicial Watch on Facebook. I'll just leave that there. But these are two things that we would consider reportable because they're about our issues and fit into the bucket of other things that we're thinking about. So on the left-hand side, we have our conspiracy theories, and on the right-hand side, we have platform accountability disinfo. All right, so now we're going to transition to talk a little bit about what we need from you moving forward. So first of all, we have one new ask, which is engaging with misinformation. So as always, I cannot emphasize this enough, we do not want to engage in any way with disinformation. But if it's misinformation, it may be worth a conversation. So if you see a post and you have a strong reason to believe that this person is acting in good faith, right? So they're attempting to share good information and they've made an honest mistake, or maybe something isn't clear, and you think they might be receptive to a conversation, it's worth reaching out. So some cues to you that it might be worth having this type of conversation are confusing typos, putting another state's guidelines about a state-specific issue, information that's outdated, right? So they were given good information, but now it's 3 days old and that's totally old news, or sharing disinfo in an attempt to debunk it, which we know is tempting. Here we have an example of a response formula. So if you're familiar with our voter assistance formula, it's very, very similar. We like to keep things as consistent for folks as we can. It's easy and we can all do it together. So if I'm a volunteer at Linda 12, the first thing I'm going to do if I see someone posting misinfo where I think they'd be willing to chat it out with me is to introduce myself. Ideally, you'd say you're a nonpartisan volunteer, but we took this from a real example, so I'm not going to nitpick. So identify yourself as a volunteer with us. Gently and respectfully correct the information. Sometimes we'll even empathize about how much wrong info is out there, right? And like how confusing that can be. Then we ask you to link a source that you trust to correct the information, and then request an update, right? Like, hey, would you mind updating this post or removing it and reposting so that other people aren't confused? I know we're trying to put out good stuff, or I know there's a lot of disinfo around X. So that's how we suggest that you go about these conversations. A great way to start with this is actually with your own network, your friends and family. In my case, my Aunt Kathy. We have someone in our lives who are posting misinfo. And so starting there can be a really great way to start engaging in these conversations. We're also going to be working with a partner group called PEN America on working on how to have these conversations more in depth. So do stay on the lookout for that. And again, gotta remind you one more time to avoid amplification of disinformation, right? So what this means, no comments, no reactions, no sharing and debunking. To a platform like Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, to their algorithms, all attention is good attention. So we don't want to push this out to more people inadvertently, and we also wouldn't want to create further confusion by mistake. All right, so now we're going to move into the proactive piece of our work. So proactive posting. There are two main types of proactive content, and we've talked about the first already. So inoculation content, again, as a review in case this is a new term, inoculates or defends voters against disinfo before it's been seen. While counterspeech content, on the other hand, fights back against disinformation once it's been seen, right? So you can think of inoculation content as the vaccine and counterspeech content as the prescription. A note about counterspeech is that we specifically tailor it to certain narratives if and when we think it's useful, right? So we're not always just going back and forth with all of the disinfo out there. That wouldn't necessarily be productive. So if we think it can be executed without amplifying disinfo, which we do not want, we'll be sure to send that out. And we're going to talk a little bit in a moment about how we do that. Here we have an example, or two examples rather, of inoculation content. So here we have our future is bright, our voices were heard, our votes were counted. So that's a really great message, and it helps us to remember that this election is now behind us, and that there was no fraud, without actually talking about or using the word voter fraud anywhere. Here we have a message about unity, about now we build a better future to show who we can be, right? And this again is a positive message that helps us to remember what we're doing together as a community, and helps to bring unity to folks across the political spectrum, and knowing that now we move forward together. So here on this inoculation content, I'm going to show you what it looks like when we send it to you. It's super easy. We send you something called a quick share link. And so what you do with these is, if say I wanted to share this on my social media, I could pick what platform I want to share it on. So maybe I want to put it on Facebook. I would simply click Facebook, and it'll pop up in another window on my Facebook account. And then here's my personal Facebook. Here's the content, here's the post, and I would just click post to Facebook to post. I actually have posted this in so many trainings now that my friends are getting confused. So I will refrain this time, but you would just click right here to post to Facebook. It's super simple, and we'll actually send these directly to you if you opt in. But more on that in a moment. And then we have counterspeech content. So clearly this content is different from the inoculation content because it's addressing an issue that we know is out there in disinfo land. So here we have that the votes have been counted and it's been completed, and that the will of the people prevailed. Here we have that the Senate must convict Trump and hold him accountable, right? So these are directly based on information that we've seen swirling around, and they're not just positive, proactive content. Now, a question that I know a lot of people are going to ask, because I take this question every single day, is, Rose, you're a nonpartisan organization. Why do you have this convict Trump message? And I'm glad you asked, or didn't ask, but if you were, I'll tell you. So here, the reason that we say that this is so important is that this is about accountability. It's not about the party, right? So if anyone were to have acted in a way that was criminal, regardless of party, common cause would follow up, right, in this exact same way. And so that's why it's so important that we post this message. It has nothing to do with Trump's politics. It has everything to do with holding him accountable for his actions. Okay, and now I'm going to turn the floor over to one of our captains, Kristen.
Hey, thank you, Rose. So I like to call the proactive content side of what we do walking on the sunny side of the street. So we hope you will join us on the sunny side. But so what we're asking you to do is to share with your own groups and your own social networks this proactive content, and either inoculation or counter speech. And there's two ways you can do that. By following the retweet channel on Slack, or joining the squad, which we'll talk about in a minute. But like today in the retweet channel, they were talking specifically about HR1, and there was some great content there. that you could repost on Twitter particularly. And then you can also join our social media squad, which I'll talk about now if you go to the next slide. So it's pretty simple concept, and many people are on, I think, text lists if it's coupons or donating to some political cause or whatnot. So that's the same idea. You sign up for it. Common Cause will send you content via text. It's really simple. You just click on the text message and it brings up, much like the form you just saw Rose posting from, where you can click to post to Twitter or Facebook or whatnot. And it just is really automatic. It's very quick, very, very quick. And it is usually about once a week. It's not very interruptive, I guess. It doesn't interrupt me very often. So I like it. Next, can I have the next slide? So if you want to become a member of the social media squad, you can just text CC squad to 97779 and that'll sign you right up. And you can start helping flood the airways with good content. And the other thing you can do is become a squad lead. And they do all the other things that a member does, but they also help recruit others. And one of the, it's just simple. It's similar to using the tools we already have, but with different search terms to search out people who might be interested in this kind of endeavor, and with certain keywords. So it's real similar to searching for disinformation. So it's pretty simple to recruit also. And so hopefully you'll join us. Okay.
Awesome, Kristen. Thank you. And you're a squad lead yourself, right?
I am.
Look at you. Yeah, so Kristen's one of our squad leads. She's also a social media monitoring captain. Same for Ron. So folks here wear a lot of hats, and I'm always endlessly proud of them. All right, so something that I think we may have gone over a little bit quickly is that a place where you want to put this proactive content is on your own social media and on closed spaces online. So what's a closed space online? That might be something like a Facebook group, right? Or it could be your next door. And the reason for this is that you're the only people who can be in those spaces because you know and understand your own communities the best, right? So the trust factor, as we like to call it, comes into play. You're a trusted person in the community, and so people are more likely to take what you post seriously. So for example, today I'm among a lot of Georgians here on the panel. So if I were to be in a Georgia Facebook group and John and Abby saw me posting proactive content there, but then saw that I lived in New York, they might not trust me, even though my proactive content was good, right? And was correct, pro-democracy information. So again, infiltration is what we don't want to do because it breeds mistrust and misinfo. So just join and post in closed spaces that actually make sense for who you are as a person. So if you're a mom in Iowa, awesome, join that Facebook group. But if not, find something that fits you a little bit better. Again, this is a place where you can be posting on just your own accounts, whether that's on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or anything in between. And if you're thinking about closed spaces, I would look on Facebook, Nextdoor, WhatsApp, and other smaller platforms that you may be already involved in. We also want to hear from you. So when we're doing our proactive messaging, we have a form that you can all fill out if you would like. And on that form, you can tell us what you're seeing when you're monitoring that might need some content. So if you remember that diagram that I showed you that was circular about how we give you evidence-based proactive information, we want to hear from you as well, because there's only so much we can see on our reports. So here on the proactive messaging form, which I'm going to walk you through right now, we remind you that you're the eyes and ears of the disinformation world. And so we ask you to tell us where you're monitoring, where you're seeing problematic stuff, what the harmful stuff is, how you would brainstorm that we correct it, and then your name if you want us to be able to follow up with you. A lot of folks have told me that they're creative here, which I love. And so this is a great way for you to channel that creativity if you want to help us build out some of this content for the squad and other posters to put out there. Okay, and then our flagship leadership opportunity is our social media monitoring captains. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Abby, who can tell you a bit more.
Thanks, Rose. All right, so we have on Slack, we have shift managers, and normally it's what, 4 to 7, 7 to 10, 4-hour shift. You get in there and you help manage the social media shifts. Normally you've got people on Twitter, Facebook, hopefully Nextdoor. I don't know how many we have on TikTok, but I think that's helpful if we can. But so the managers are able to create the shifts and just be there for any questions. Sometimes something comes up. Is this something that is concerning, and we can deal with that. It's also platform experts. Some people are really good with Twitter. Others are better with Facebook. I am a Twitter, but I'm not the best at all. But that's what the platform experts do. The program leaders, I am not as familiar with this one. So Rose, I might have to hand that back to you. And then the resource creators too. These are our creative types that we are so grateful for. So I'm going to pass that to you if you can explain those.
You see, Abby helps keep us grounded, which is super important. And then we also have some folks who take on more creative direction, right? So to be clear, these are all tasks that any social media monitoring captain can take on. Every single one of them is a shift manager, right? So helping us, making sure that shifts run smoothly, answering questions. So in the shift chat, they're there to help. They're a friendly face. I'm sure you've seen a ton of captains in your channels before, but they can also be experts in a platform, like Abby said, or maybe they want to help us think about the direction in which the program should go. So I work with some people who are captains, who are much my senior, who have worked in nonprofits their whole lives, right? And so we value their input. Even though they're not staff, honestly, in some ways, they're way better. And then we have people who help us with resources. So, all those helpful guides that we have about like how to use Instagram or how to get access to CrowdTangle, those are actually made by captains for the most part. Like we edit them, but the captains really take a lead there. So there's a lot of ways for you to deepen your involvement with Common Cause, either as a squad lead or as a social media monitoring captain. Okay, so moving forward, what does this all look like? So our next steps. First of all, you're going to be able to expect a follow-up email from me and John with all of the necessary resources after training. Because of, you all are veterans, you've at least monitored once before, which is how you got this invitation. I'm going to just go ahead and send you our Basecamp document, as well as the link to join Slack in case maybe you deleted it off your phone after the election. I probably would have if I didn't work here. And then we're also going to give you opportunities to become a leader, whether that's in your own community by posting proactively in your closed spaces online or on your own profile, through being a squad lead or just learning more about it, or by being a social media monitoring captain. So what I'm going to actually do now is briefly stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to put out a poll to get a sense of who wants to do what. That way I can follow up with you with the correct information. So I'm going to go ahead and put that poll up on the screen now. And I'm going to launch the poll. If you don't see it, please put a question in the chat. And so I'll have an idea of who's more interested in what. And then we'll just do some question and answer and then call it a night. So again, thank you to everyone for coming. I already see interest in captaining, squad lead. That's awesome. All right, 45% voter participation. So we're getting better than the average in the US across states. We're going to keep waiting for that number to go up. Also a shout out to Laura, who's in the chat. She's also a captain. She works a lot on the Reddit team. She's also a jack of all trades. So she really is helpful. If the questionnaire or the poll disappeared on you, it might be behind the window you're looking at. So if you're looking at me and John and Kristen and Ron and Abby, we're very flattered, but you know what we look like. So if you move us to the side, likely the poll is in the window right behind that. We're at 61% of folks voting. I'm gonna wait till about 80%. At some point, maybe I'll start singing the Jeopardy theme, but we can hope that we don't get to that point. Again, the three options that we have here are just remembering that you can proactively post content in your own closed spaces, and that's a way that you can lead with us. You can also become a squad lead and help us to recruit new folks into the social media squad. Or you can become a social media monitoring captain. So as you may have noticed, we have a bit less capacity than we used to, and so we really need your help. This is also, remember, a shared project, right? So our disinformation work and our social media monitoring belongs to everyone. Now, I see someone in the chat saying that this does not represent what they wanted to choose. So if there's something else that you're interested in, you can go ahead and put that in the chat. I will save the chat and then John and I will review it after the webinar. There's 54 of you plus us, and then 36 of you have filled out the questions. So I'll give one more quick 30 seconds and then that will close the poll. Okay. We're going to close it here for now. I see a lot of interest in becoming a social media monitoring captain and also about posting content proactively. So thank you so much to everyone who did this. If you had trouble accessing the poll, please just leave whatever you're interested in the chat and we can go ahead and help you get that sorted out. All right, so now we are going to move into our question and answer portion of the evening. So first of all, before we get to that, thank you so much for attending tonight. I look forward to keeping up the great work with you all, and I'm so grateful that you took the time to be here this evening. If you do have a question, if you want to raise your hand, your virtual hand, because I can't see you, I can go ahead and unmute you and put you on the air. So let me know if you have a question or a comment and I will get to you as soon as possible. I do see in Q&A, I'm not sure if we were following this, I see Aya, who I know well. Hello. I haven't talked